Beruchim haboim. Welcome everyone. We're about to begin Be'ezras Hashem together on Daf Kuf Yud Beis Amud Beis, 2 lines from the top. The Gemara previously brought Abaye, who was walking together with Rav Yosef on Shabbos, and Abaye's sandal, the strap broke off, and it was now unwearable. He says to Rav Yosef, "What should I do?" Rav Yosef said, "It's muktzah, leave it." Abaye challenged that ruling, and he said, after all, granted it's on the left foot, and it's a exterior strap, whereby normally one cannot fix it and wear it again. So it would normally be a problem. However, I could go ahead and wear it on my right foot, making it an internal strap, whereby nobody would see it, and then it would be wearable, and thereby it being a valid kli, and it should not be a problem of muktzah. Rabbi Yosef said, no, because Rabbi Yochanan paskins like Rabbi Yehuda, saying that one cannot take an exterior strap and then switch it to an interior strap. And the Gemara brought at length a brisa to then show that Rabbi Yehuda is the one who holds that both in regards to Tumah and in regards to Shabbos, such a sandal whose exterior strap is broken is no longer a kli, not for Tumah and not for Shabbos. The Gemara now challenges this statement. Omer Rabbi Yochanan Hochi. Who said that Rabbi Yochanan said that indeed the halach is like Rabbi Yehuda, that you cannot take an exterior strap and then change it to the other foot. V'ha'omar Rabbi Yochanan halacha kistam mishnah. Rabbi Yochanan holds that the halacha is like stam mishnah. And what does the mishnah say? It's a mishnah in Kelim, V'tnan. Sandal shenifseko achas me'oiznov v'tikno. If a sandal has one of the straps that breaks off, and one then fixes that strap, tamei midras. It is now still a valid kli, and it's tamei midras. Therefore, if a zav were to wear such a sandal, he can go ahead and metame this sandal. My lav loishna mitpnimis. Are we not talking about the internal part? Veloishna chitzona, or the external ritzua? In other words, this Mishnah does not make a distinction. It just says if one of the straps were to then break and you fix it, it's still tamei midras. It still is a valid kli. So therefore, how can you tell me that a stam Mishnah that Rabbi Yochanan always goes like says otherwise? Answers the Gemara, lo pnimis davka. We're talking about pnimius in this Mishnah. That's why it's still a valid kli when you're masakin it. Aval chitzoina, mai. But chitzon, what would be the din? Tor. It would no longer be a kli. And that's indeed what Rabbi Yochanan paskins like. Ihochi asked the Gemara, adetoni nisika shniya v'tikna tahor minha midras aval tamei maga midras. That which it says in the hemshech of the Mishnah, it says if there's the second strap, when that breaks, so it says he's no longer going to be then a tamei midras. That means that whatever was the zav was put when he put his foot into the sandal beforehand as metamit, now it no longer retains its tumah, its tahor, in regards to tumas midras. But it still has tamei of maga of a midras, because since the first ritzua that broke off, granted it broke off and was subsequently fixed, but before it was fixed, so then it became tamei by the zav who put his foot inside of this sandal. So therefore, granted that first ritzua was fixed, but it now remains, now the whole sandal becomes tamei maga from the zav. Ask the Gemara, since this is the seifa of that Mishnah, the hemshech of that Mishnah, and you're trying to tell me that the first part of the Mishnah is talking about only pnimis, when the strap is a pnimis, an internal strap that breaks, it remains a valid sandal, a valid kli, then niflug bidida, really niflug v'nisni bidida, then go ahead and distinguish and teach within itself from what we taught in the Reisha, as follows. That, in other words, that the Reisha who's talking about, it's an internal strap that would break, whereby if you fix it, it will then be a valid kli, a sandal that still is tamei. So then teach me that in the same scenario, if it was an external strap that would break, it would lose its status as a kli and would be tahor. as follows. Bamed dvar mamurim shenifseka pnimis. When is it talking about in the Reisha that it still is a valid kli? That is when the internal strap breaks. Aval chitzoina tor. But if the external strap were to break, then tor. In other words, then you don't have to teach the sefer, because then we'd already know then that an external strap that breaks would be tome. We don't have to come on, would be tar. We don't have to come on to two straps, the second strap being then broken. We would know that the second strap is an external strap, and that broke, and therefore we know it's tar already, from the fact that we already have the case in the Reisha. Answers the Gemara, Amar Yitzchok ben Yosef, you're right. We can't then say that. Rather, Tehei Mishnasenu b'sandal sheish lo arba oznayim va'arba tarstiyosim. You have to say that we're talking about a sandal that has two sets. That means 4 straps on each side. 2 oznayim on one side, 2 oznayim on the other. 2 trestoyosim, 2 on one side, 2 on the other side. And then we're talking about the external straps. That's what it's referring to. Shalolishbor dvar Rabbi Yochanan, in order not to then break the words of Rabbi Yochanan, to then maintain that Rabbi Yochanan paskins like Rabbi Yehuda, that when indeed it's an external strap, then it loses its state of tuma. Says the Gemara Vaita, Ki Asa Ravin Omar. When Ravin came, he said the following: Rav Chanan bar Abba Omar Rav Halacha Rabbi Yehuda. That Rav Chanan and Bar Abba say in the name of Rav, the halacha is like Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yochanan Omar, Ein halacha Rabbi Yehuda. So Ravin is saying that Rabbi Yochanan says the halacha is not like Rabbi Yehuda. And until now we said that Rabbi Yochanan does maintain the halacha is like Rabbi Yehuda. Ask the Gemara, Umi Omar Rabbi Yochanan Hochi, did Rabbi Yochanan indeed say this, that the halacha is not like Rabbi Yehuda? V'ho midimitaretz Rabbi Yochanan ali with Rabbi Yehuda, from the fact that Rabbi Yochanan answered according to Rabbi Yehuda, Shma Mino ki Rabbi Yehuda svirulei, like we proved before from the Brisa. The fact that Rabbi Yochanan explained the Brisa to be like Rabbi Yehuda, it then follows that he holds indeed that the halacha is like Rabbi Yehuda. So how can Ravin say that Rabbi Yochanan said the halacha is not like Rabbi Yehuda? Answers the Gemara, Amoroi Ninhu, it's a machlokes Amoroim, according to what did Rabbi Yochanan say? V'aliv Rabbi Yochanan. What was the shita Rabbi Yochanan? Was Rabbi Yochanan saying the halacha is like Rabbi Yehuda, or was Rabbi Yochanan saying the halacha is not like Rabbi Yehuda? Says the Gemara, Vaiter Tnan Hasom. There's a Mishnah that's stated over there again in Kalim. Kol Kli Bale Batim, Shiuron Kirimoinim. A Kli of a balabos. So such a kli is something that the balabas, he spares the kli. In other words, if it gets a small hole in it, he doesn't just throw it away. Unlike a uman who's selling the kli, if it gets a hole in it, he discards it. But a balabayas, he wants to use it for more other things. So a small hole, he uses it for something that then has potential to hold something that can hold something that is bigger than that hole. And therefore, for example, let's say he normally has a kli. Until now it was used for zaysim. So then if it gets a hole that the size of a zayis, then he puts walnuts in that container, whereby it can be valid for to be holding the nuts. If it gets even a bigger hole, then he uses it to hold pomegranates. So we're talking about a kli, a bowl, for example, that is made out of 8. So the Mishnah says over here, it's a valid kli until it gets the shear of a rimon, of a pomegranate. That means if it gets a hole of a pomegranate, then it already is no longer considered to be a valid kli. Boy Chizkiah. Chizkiah now asks the following question. Nikov kemoitzi zayis v'sotmoy. If a person has such a kli, a balabais has a kli, and it gets a hole in it the size of a zayis, and then he closes it. Okay? And before he closes it, so then it becomes tamei. Then he goes ahead and he closes it. And then he goes ahead and sees that there's another hole next to that hole, and he closes that, the size of a zayis. Until he gets to the size, if you were to add up all of those holes that he closed, it would get to the size of a hole of a rimon, of a pomegranate. What's the din? In other words, do we say that a hole of a pomegranate has to be all at once in order to invalidate the kli? Or do we say that even if it's going to be multiple holes that will ultimately be the size of a pomegranate, it will then also invalidate the kli? Omar le, Rabbi Yochanan said, Rabbi, Shani Soloni, Rabbi, you taught this to us. Sandal shenifseka achas me'oiznov v'tikna tamei midras. This is the Mishnah we quoted earlier. Also a Mishnah in Kalim, that you taught Rebbe that a sandal, that one of the oznayim were to break off, and it was fixed, so it would be a tamei midras, because since indeed it's still a valid sandal, a person can take a strap and wrap it all the way around the other ozen and over the foot, so he can still wear the sandal. So therefore, it's a valid sandal. Nifseka shniya, the Mishnah goes on to say, if the second ozen were to then break off, then it says v'tikna, and he fixes it tahor mina midras. Then he's going to be tahor mina midras. That means that it loses the status before as tamei midras. Therefore, if the zav beforehand were to put his foot into the sandal, so now it no longer is tamei. The sandal is tahor in regards to midras. Aval tamei maga midras. But since that first strap, the first oizen was repaired, before it was repaired, it became tamei from the zav touching the sandal. So therefore it had a tamei of maga, even though subsequently it was repaired. So it's still going to have that tuma on the sandal. What is the difference? The first one, where the second one is kayim. Shniya nami miskina rishoina. The second one also is going to then have the first one being repaired. He taught us on this. Ponim chadosh is bulakan. The difference is that it's considered to be a new kli. In other words, granted that the first in the ratio when the first oizen was fixed, we said that it was a viable kli. So when you said why isn't it the same when the second one is broken, that's also then going to be fixed and being a viable kli. The answer is because once the second one breaks, although the first one was already fixed, we say that it's panim chadashas bol lekan. We say that the kli, in this case the sandal, since it didn't have the first oizen, granted again the first oizen was fixed, but if it didn't have the first oizen and it lost the second oizen as well, it would be an invalid kli altogether. So we say that even though it was fixed in the interim, we say panim chadash bol lekan, and therefore it's considered to be invalid as a kli for a midras tuma. So too over here wants to draw a parallel. Hachanami, panim chadash bol lekan. So too over here, in regards to the bowl, when you have a hole of a zayis that was closed, and again a hole of zayis that was closed until they add up to the size of a hole of a rimon of a pomegranate. So we say panim chadash bol lekan. Rabbi Yochanan says we see from this that indeed it's the same principle, that therefore it would be an invalid kli, and therefore it would lose its status as tamei. Says the Gemara that he was so enthralled with Rabbi Yochanan's answer that he said to him, Kari alei les dein bar inash, that Rabbi Yochanan is not like a human being. He's like an angel. Ikadamre kigon dein bar inish. Or some say he's like this great man, such an incredibly great individual, as he's able to then teach us halachos. That was the shvach he gave Rabbi Yochanan. The Gemara goes on to say the following statement: Amar Rabbi Zeira, Amar Rove bar Zimuna, Im Rishonim b'nei malachim, anu b'nei anoshim. If the earlier ones, the earlier generations, are like malachim, then we are like human beings. V'im Rishonim b'nei anoshim, anu kichamorim. And if the earlier generations are like human beings, then we are like donkeys. V'lo kichamora shel Rabbi Pinchas ben Rabbi Chanina ben Doisa, v'shel Rabbi Pinchas ben Yoyer. Ele kishar chamor, and not like the donkeys of Rabbi Chanina ben Doisa and Rabbi Pinchas ben Yoyer. These donkeys, they would not eat from grain that was not tithed. And therefore, not like those donkeys, like regular donkeys.